I was the fastest wrench in Harlan's yard, and I made sure everybody knew it. Ships came in limping from the frontier lanes, and I had them lifting off again before the coffee in my thermos went cold. Other mechanics timed their work in shifts. I timed mine in minutes. Old Harlan used to say, "A job done right takes as long as it takes," and I used to smile and nod and go right on proving him wrong, because fast paid the bills and careful paid nothing extra that I could see. I had a reputation to keep too, small as it was. Freight captains asked for me by name. I liked the sound of that more than I liked the men saying it. I liked walking a hull inspection at a jog, liked the little flourish I put on tightening a bolt, liked being the fastest thing in a yard full of slow, patient men who'd been at this trade since before I was born. I never once thought there was a job out there that speed couldn't solve. Then the storm came through Kestrel's Landing on a night the sky looked bruised, and something came down with it. I heard the skylight go before I understood what I was hearing. A crack of old glass, a heavy wet thud on the concrete, a sound like a sail tearing. I grabbed the lamp and there she was, half buried in glass and rain, a young drake no bigger than a delivery sled, scaled hide the color of wet slate, one wing bent wrong at the joint, a leather message pouch still cinched tight across her narrow chest, like she'd rather die than lose it. She saw me and went rigid, every scale up, throat working around a sound too raw to be a growl. I'd never been that close to a dragon in my life. I'd fixed engines for men who hunted them. I didn't know a single gentle thing to do with my hands that wasn't a wrench. My first instinct was pure me. Fix it fast, splint the wing, get her stable, get back to the ship on the lift waiting on its manifest. I had her leg half strapped before she screamed, a sound that about took the hearing out of my left ear, and I understood right then that fast was going to kill her. So I stopped. I sat down on the cold concrete a good 6 feet off, and I put the tools down where she could see them, and I waited. It took an hour before her breathing settled. It took most of the night before she let me close enough to touch the wing without trying to take my hand off at the wrist. I named her Thistle, mostly because she made herself hard to hold and I liked her for it. 3 days I kept her in the back bay behind a stack of cargo crates, past due jobs stacking up in the yard, calls from clients going to voicemail. I fed her saltfish from the cannery and cleaned the wing joint twice a day, and learned, slow as anything, the difference between the low grumble that meant leave me and the higher hum that meant closer, if you're careful. I learned she liked the lamp turned low. I learned she slept with her good wing curled over the message pouch like it still had someplace urgent to be. I learned other things too, things no client ever paid me to know. That a dragon's fear smells faintly of hot metal, that the right kind of stillness is its own kind of language, and that I'd spent my whole life being loud in a trade that mostly asks you to listen. The first time she let me lay a palm flat against her ribs and feel the fast, frightened drum of her heart slow down under my hand, I sat there afterward for a long time doing absolutely nothing, which was, up to that point, the single least productive hour of my adult life, and I did not regret 1 second of it. Harlan came by on the second day, took one look through the crates, and didn't say a word about the backed-up work order. He just brought me a second thermos and left it on the bench. It was the third night I finally worked up the nerve to open the pouch, careful, while she dozed. Inside was a strip of hide, scored with a sigil I knew from the news feeds, and nowhere I wanted to know it from. 3 interlocking talons, the mark of the Vaelkir wing. Frontier folk talked about that wing the way you talk about weather that kills people. They didn't come looking, they came burning, and they didn't stop until they found what they were owed. I sat there a long while with that strip of hide in my hand, looking at a scout too small and too scared to be anybody's soldier, and I thought about every story I'd heard about what a wing like that did to whoever they found standing over one of their own. I could have put her out past the yard gate and let the frontier take its chances with her. Nobody would have blamed me. I didn't do it. I told myself it was because a half-set wing wouldn't survive the walk. Mostly it was because by then she'd taken to resting her jaw against my knee while I worked the splint. And a man doesn't unlearn a thing like that just because it's inconvenient. They came on the 6th day, and the sky told you before anything else did. A wrongness in the light. A shadow too wide and too quiet for weather. I heard the yard go silent, block by block as they passed over it. That particular silence of people deciding whether to run. I didn't run. I don't know that I could have if I'd wanted to. I was elbow deep in the last stretch of Thistle's wing wrap when the big doors of the bay came off their track. Not from force, just from the wind of wings that size passing close. And I looked up into more dragons than I'd ever seen standing in one place. And at the front of them, something old and dark red and scarred along one whole flank, in a way that told you exactly how she'd earned her place at the front. I want to say I stood up straight and brave. I didn't. I stayed on my knees with the wrap half-tied, because Thistle had gone rigid again, and I wasn't going to let go of a scared animal mid-splint no matter what was standing in my doorway. The old red dragon's eyes went to the pouch first, then to the wing, then to me, and I watched something in that terrible ancient face come apart and put itself back together as something else entirely. Nobody spoke. Thistle made a sound low in her throat, not fear this time, and the old dragon answered it in the same register, and I understood, without a word passing between any of us in a language I knew, that I was watching a mother recognize a voice she'd stopped hoping to hear. The wing didn't burn the yard down. They didn't kneel either. I want to be clear about that, because I've heard the stories told wrong since, dressed up grander than they were. What happened was smaller and better than that. The old red dragon came forward alone, slow, deliberate, the whole enormous weight of her lowering to my level, and she looked at the wrap on Thistle's wing, my clumsy stitching, 3 days of trial and error, and she looked at it, a long time before she looked at me. Then she huffed once, low, and nosed a single dark scale loose from along her scarred flank, and set it down on the workbench beside my tools, gentle as anything that size has any business being. I didn't know what it meant then. I've been told since, by people who study the wings, that it's a promise mark, that a Vaelkir doesn't hand one out for a debt paid. They hand it out for a debt they've decided they'll never be able to repay, so they mark you instead, and leave the rest unsaid. They took Thistle up slow, careful of the wing, and she looked back at me once from her mother's foreleg, with something that wasn't quite goodbye. Then the wind came up under all of them at once, and the sky closed over where they'd been like it had never opened. Harlan found me still kneeling on the concrete a good while after, staring at a black scale on my workbench between a torque wrench and a half-eaten sandwich. I still keep that scale where I can see it while I work. I don't rush jobs the way I used to. Freight captains still ask for me by name, but they've stopped asking how fast I can turn a hull around, and I've stopped offering it up first. Harlan never said a word about the change. He just started leaving the second thermos out without being asked, like he'd known all along it was coming. Some nights, when the wind comes up wrong off the frontier lanes, I think about a scared, scaled thing curled over a message she never delivered, and about how the fastest thing I ever did in that garage was learn, for once in my life, how to be slow. I think about the old red dragon lowering herself down to a mechanic's level in a wrecked bay full of glass, and how she never once asked me to be anything more than what I already was. Just a man who'd stopped long enough to notice something small and frightened, and stayed.